Hi, this is My Cheating Diary. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Now, let's begin. My name is Claire, and saying it out loud feels like introducing the woman I was before everything cracked. I'm 43, a nurse in Boston who double knots her clogs, and for nearly 20 years, I believed my marriage to David was unshakable. We had an 18-year-old son, Michael, and from the street, our life looked stable. 2 cars, trimmed hedges, neighborly waves. But one night slid past ordinary and changed everything, and I was the one who opened the gate and let it happen. David traveled often for work, living out of a suitcase that smelled of hotel soap and jet fuel. Every departure I told myself I was fine, that I could handle the hollow rooms. I said it like a mantra until it sounded true. He'd kiss my forehead, quick, familiar, and murmur, "Just a week, okay?" As if those 7 days were a hill and not a mountain. Michael kept to himself, headphones on, buried in the glow of screens and homework, like most teenagers orbiting from a private moon. The house grew quieter with every trip. The silence pressed on my chest and sat beside me like a guest who never leaves. One evening, after a fluorescent-lit shift and a parade of beeping monitors, I poured a glass of wine and watched it unwind my shoulders. Then the doorbell rang, one bright chime cutting through the hush, and my heart did a quick, curious jump. It was Peter, our neighbor across the hall, recently divorced, standing with a soft smile and a foil-covered casserole, steam fogging the lid. "Figured you could use some company," he said, voice easy. And for a moment, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in months. I should have closed the door. I should have thanked him and sent him away. But guilt shouts only after the choice is made. Instead, I stepped aside and let him in, telling myself it was harmless, just neighbors, dinner, talk to fill a shapeless night. We ate at the kitchen island, forks clinking, the casserole warm and comforting in a way that made my tired body soften. We talked about weather, the building, his new routines, my shift stories, small talk stretching like a bridge over a river I wouldn't name. We laughed more than I had in weeks, sudden and bright. For a dizzy second, I thought, oh, I've missed this so much. The wine blurred the pencil lines I'd drawn, and when his hand brushed mine, I froze, caught in hesitation. That pause, small as a heartbeat, was the moment where everything began to tilt. The next morning, I woke with shame sitting on my chest, the room too bright, too honest about what I'd done. I told myself it was a one-time lapse I could fold up and hide, a door I could slam so hard the house would forget. But when David called from the airport and asked about my day, I lied without hesitation, and I hated how easy it felt. Guilt didn't fade. It settled into the corners like a stain you scrub and never lift. Peter kept reaching out, short texts, a wave in the hall, and though I knew better, some neglected part of me leaned toward the warmth. Then came the night everything unraveled, thread by thread. I felt it before the first tug, a storm about to split open. Michael came downstairs unexpectedly, socks whispering on the steps, and my heart hiccuped. Now. His eyes landed on Peter's jacket over the chair, a careless, damning flag, and I saw the picture assemble in his head. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, voice tight, bracing for an answer he didn't want, and the room tilted. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. Words piled up behind it, like traffic on a closed road. Before I could answer, Peter walked in, with 2 glasses of water, casual as a neighbor returning a dish. Suspicion turned to certainty. Michael's face went crimson, heat climbing his cheeks, his eyes glossed with a fury he tried not to spill. You're lying to Dad? The words cracked like a plate on tile, impossibly loud. I flinched as if they'd struck me. His voice shook the walls, rattling frames, and I thought, God, what have I done to our boy? I begged him to calm down, reaching with hands that had no right to ask for grace, but he stormed off and slammed his door. In that second, I knew everything had changed. That look, hurt braided with rage, burned into me. I still see the set of his jaw and the tremble he tried to swallow. The next morning, Michael barely spoke, answers clipped to syllables, his gaze sliding past me like I was a lamp. When David called from the airport, Michael snatched the phone like a lifeline, his fingers white along the edges. Dad, you need to come home. Mom's been hiding things. Hearing my son say it felt like being dropped into ice water. The silence on the line was a knife, clean and cold. Though I couldn't hear David breathe, I felt him measuring the shards. That night, David walked in with his suitcase still zipped, eyes hollowed as if the flight drained the color from him. Is it true? He asked quietly, the kind of quiet that contains a scream. And I felt myself shrink. I tried to explain, to package it as a mistake, a storm of loneliness, but every word sounded cheap and flimsy. Michael stood behind him, arms folded like a barricade, hatred burning in his eyes. I had to look away. David turned without raising his voice, walked down the hall like an old man, and shut the bedroom door with a soft finality. The days after felt like punishment I'd sentenced myself to, moving through hours with lead in my limbs, every task wrapped in wire. Michael avoided me with a spy's skill, schedules misaligned, his footsteps vanishing whenever mine approached. The distance ballooned. David slept in the guest room, the lamp throwing a pale slice onto the carpet like a line I couldn't cross. At work, I functioned on autopilot, vitals, charting, the beeps and buzzes, while my mind replayed scenes I couldn't edit. I prayed for a chance to fix things, bargaining with a god I'd ignored, but papers came instead, separation, neat letters spelling consequence. Michael chose him, of course he did, and the choice felt like a verdict delivered with perfect clarity. I packed my life into boxes, sweaters folded, with shaking hands, photos slipped into bubble wrap, an inventory of what I'd thrown away. Months crawled by like a slow drag across gravel. The calendar flipped with a bored sound I hated. David and I exchanged business-like texts about Michael, grades, meetings, schedules, our language reduced to bullet points without tenderness. There was no anger, no yelling. His silence cut deeper, suggesting a world where I no longer existed. Michael stopped picking up my calls. I watched the screen ring itself out, my reflection hovering over glass I didn't recognize. I became a stranger to my own son. And when that truth settled, I jolted. How did I let it come to this? Peter tried to reach out, a handful of tentative texts, but I let them rot in a thread I never opened. Whatever comfort he gave had scorched my world to ash. I couldn't look at him without tasting smoke. Eventually he vanished, his door quiet, his car gone at odd hours, the building swallowing the absence without a sound. And I was left alone, with guilt that slept beside me and consequences that woke me. Pacing an apartment where even the clock judged. Therapy became my lifeline. A weekly chair where I could say the awful thing plain and not flinch. I wanted to know why I risked everything for nothing, why brief absolution felt worth the wreckage. I needed a map back to myself. One day my therapist said, loneliness doesn't justify betrayal. You owed David honesty, not escape, and the words landed like a steady hand. She was right, and the admission stung, proof it had hit bone. My failure didn't begin with Peter. It began the day I stopped talking and let small resentments bloom in the dark. Holidays hurt the most, calendar landmines where absence sits at the table like an honored guest. Last Christmas, I sat in a silent apartment and pictured Michael tearing open gifts while David offered a faint, tired smile, me neatly erased. I sometimes write Michael letters I'll never send, filling pages at night as if apologizing on paper could practice my mouth for a real talk. They all begin the same. I'm sorry, two small words that feel pitiful and enormous. A knock on a door I can't open. I betrayed your father, and I betrayed you, because betrayal splits like lightning, never choosing only one tree to strike. Maybe someday he'll read them and understand that even people who love deeply can make choices that destroy everything. David's moved on. I hear it in the clipped civility of our messages and the way his voice no longer trudges toward me. He's with someone new now, a name I know but never say. The thought flares and then fades like a match in wind. A part of me aches, but another part hopes she gives him the peace I couldn't, that the home I cracked is quiet again. Michael's thriving, soccer, friends, good grades, and every update hurts and heals. I'm proud enough to burst and ashamed enough to hide. I cheer for him from the shadows, clapping in rooms where no one hears me, whispering his name like a prayer on long nights. Regret never leaves, it just changes shape. Sometimes it sits beside me like a shadow. Sometimes it leans over my shoulder, reminding me of that night I can't erase. I replay it like a broken film, hoping the ending will shift. If I had shut the door, poured the wine away, called David, maybe our family would still be whole. But I didn't, and now I live in the ruins I created. Infidelity doesn't just break vows, it cracks mirrors until you can't recognize yourself. It splits families, leaves fault lines in dinners and holidays, scars in places that once felt safe. The worst echo is my son's voice, hurt, furious, still ringing in my head. That moment carved a line through our lives that will never fade. I didn't just betray my husband, I betrayed my child. And that scar will never heal. Thanks for being part of this story. If you'd like to hear more, feel free to subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next diary entry. I'm curious, what do you think about this one? Maybe you've lived through something similar. Drop your story in the comments below. Thank you for taking the time to listen.